Over the past few years, researchers have been sounding the alarm about what they say is a serious health issue: loneliness. Studies show it can lead to increased heart disease, cognitive decline, or even early death. And several have found loneliness has reached epidemic proportions. But now there's an even bigger concern, that young adults and teens are feeling it the hardest. A nationwide study out this week from research firm Ipsos and health insurer Cigna found about half of adults surveyed either sometimes or always feel lonely or isolated. And among those 18 to 22 years old, 69% reported feelings of isolation even when they were around others. And 68% they feel like no one really knows them well. The numbers raise serious concerns about the well-being of the next generation. Could it be their obsessive relationship with technology? Joining me is Sherry Turkle, social studies of science and technology professor at MIT, and author of a slew of books on the issue, including Alone Together, Reclaiming Conversation, Simulation and Its Discontents. Great to see you, Sherry Turkle. How are you?
Great to be here. Good.
Is it safe to say you were the least surprised person in America when you heard this? You are, right?
Yes, I'm the least surprised.
And why is that?
Well, because this really is, I wrote a book called Alone Together.
I know you did.
And the essential finding of that book is that when we immerse ourselves in a technology that essentially is always on and always on us, we're multitasking with other people when we're with other people and we're with the technology, and we never really give other people our full attention.
And do you buy that there's a direct correlation? Because one of the things they said in the survey was that there's no clear connection between social media, for example, and screen time. And you've proven that there is, haven't you?
Well, it's complicated.
How so?
Because if what you're doing on the screen is organizing, getting together with friends, if what you're doing on the screen is watching television or watching a movie, sometimes with other people, all of that counts as screen time.
So it depends on how isolating the experience is with the screen.
You know, I remember watching television with my family and fighting with the television, fighting with the family. I don't want to count that as passive television watching. It was a very communal experience. So the trouble with studies that just kind of lump together screen time is it's not counting what you're doing with the screen.
So, you know, Facebook is doing this thing, I'm sure you know much more about than I, where they're trying to separate time well spent, as they call it, versus total screen time. That's a variation on what you're talking about,
yes,
right?
Yes, it is. It is.
There's a great quote from you. I don't know where I read this. I just love this quote. As I get famouser and famouser, this is Sherry Turkle, I post more office hours and the number of students attending goes down. Is it safe to assume that has some connection to the lack of human interaction? Is that where you were going with that, or where were you going with that comment?
Well, where I was going with is that I basically, in my classes, I encourage students to come to see me, and my students tell me that they would rather just send me a text, send me an email, send me a perfect question, and their desire is that I will send them the perfect answer back. So there's a fantasy that somehow when we use our screens, we can present ourselves as we want to be seen and get this perfect answer back.
As opposed to imperfect human interaction, the sloppy and messy and all those kinds of things.
The thing that people tell me is they don't want to be boring. They're bored by other people. They reach for a screen the minute they feel bored. And this fantasy of the perfect and the perfect, this is what our phones teach us. So we learn lessons from our phones. We learn lessons from our technology that it's possible to present yourself as perfect that really have nothing to do with being with empathy or with being or having the feeling of being known or appreciated by another person. And that's why you get that terrible finding, that crucial finding that when people are finally together, they feel alone.
You know, by the way, in the same survey from Cigna and Ipsos, I guess this fits this thing we're discussing, in a total counterintuitive belief, I would assume the older you get, the lonelier you are, because people fade away, they die. The least lonely here are the oldest, and I assume that's because they're the least tech-obsessed of any generation. Is that probably why?
I think it's again more complicated. I think it's because they've learned habits of being with other people, where when they are with other people, they can get something out of their being with other people that stays with them.
You know, this quote from your book, Alone Together, I'm going to get it
Yeah.
mostly right. It's not nearly as good as Famouser and Famouser, but I'll do the best I can. It's something like, to get rid of an addiction, you have to dump the addictive thing, the thing,
Yeah.
substance. But as I think you point out right after you write that in your book,
Yeah.
Alone Together, you can't dump the internet. You can't.
Right.
So what do you do? Assuming people agree with your analysis and the survey, what's the cure that passes the laugh test? Not to, give up your phone for a week and
No.
that sort of garbage. What's real?
The real thing to do is to first realize that you have a problem, and that one of the things you need to do, and suck it up, is you need to learn to be bored some of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You need to learn to have a moment of solitude and not reach for a phone some of the time, and to recognize that these are qualities you need to cultivate in yourself, to be able to sit with someone else and just experience another person. And to do that, what I recommend is you need to have kind of sacred spaces, designated spaces in your home, in your life, where you're not going to have your phone. It doesn't mean giving it up.
Even if you're by yourself.
Even if you're by yourself.
Because by separating yourself from that technology, you prepare yourself or train yourself to deal with other human beings.
Absolutely.
Is that the point there?
Absolutely. Because you're preparing yourself, you need to learn how to have solitude without reaching for the phone. You need to learn how to have a moment of boredom and looking within and finding your imagination and finding yourself without rushing to the phone.
When I read things about this humane technology, some group in San Francisco called the Center for Humane Tech, should I be cynical, or is this a CYA kind of thing on the part of Silicon Valley, or they really have concerns about the damage that's being done by our addiction obsession with
I
their
think
technology?
there's starting to be a good faith effort by the people who brought you this stuff. Well, first of all, the people who brought you this stuff keep their children away from this stuff. So this I can report from my own
that really
field.
true?
That is really true. I can report this from my serious field work. Their children go to Montessori schools. Steve Jobs did not allow iPads around the dinner table because they value conversation. They know it worked for them, and they want to pass that on. That kind of, it's where creativity, it's where communication, they value that. So creating places, and I suggest the kitchen, the dining room, the car. The car is not where people should be catching up on their social media feed. The bedroom is very important. It's not a place for kids to be.
Every time you're here, I feel like you're just talking to me, by the way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you are. I'm going to try to follow those rules. And by the way, you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to be even famouser and famouser.
Do you think my students will come talk to me?
Sherry Turkle, it's great to see
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.